Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Garrett Horner. This is stage 6 of Tour of the Basque Country 2024. Today's race is going to be an exciting one. 138 kilometers, about 85 miles in length, and 7 categorized climbs. Now, if you went to bed last night and you're one of the bike racers, you're worried if you don't have your climbing legs. If you went to bed in your Skjelmose and you saw the way your team raced yesterday in stage 5, you're thinking, okay, this is good, but I have to get to the penultimate climb and I have to get there close enough to any GC guys that I can control everyone going up the penultimate climb. It's a category 1 climb, 4.1 kilometers at almost 10%. It's a monster of a climb. They use this climb all the time in the Basque Country. But if we back the film up a little bit, if you look at the profile with 72 kilometers, there's another category 1 climb that's 5 kilometers, almost 10%, and 17% sections. So you got to survive that climb, that category 1 with 72 kilometers that starts and summits. You got to survive that with teammates. You have to get into the last category 1 climb, and hopefully you have to have a teammate over the top of that category 1 climb so you can have some protection going down the descent, and it'll take you into the final category 3 climb that'll summit with just about 12 kilometers to go. That is what you want if you're Skjelmose on this stage 6 here. You want teammates with you throughout the whole stage, or you have to have such good legs that you can light everybody up on the penultimate category 1 climb and solo into the finish, much like we saw Jonas do last year here at the Basque Country, where he just dropped everyone, soloed the whole finishing part. Then he didn't have to worry about tactics, right? But the problem is, Jonas Vingegaard, Primoz Roglic, and Remco Evenepoel have crashed out of this Tour of the Basque Country, so nobody has that kind of power to solo into the finish, so your tactics have to be perfect. And today's stage is wicked difficult. Take you back to the 2021 Tour when they went through here on this last and final stage. It blew up before the 72 kilometer to go climb started the category 1. It blew up going up that thing. It was a nightmare, tactical nightmare for UAE team members. Going to be a different scenario for them racing here today if they can get their tactics right, but it's going to be hard to plan it right because when the cameras come on, it's 100 kilometers to go. We see a break of just under 25 riders. UAE team members have 2 riders in that group. Bax is one and Igor Arieta is the other one. Both not a threat on the general classification. When you look at this big group, sometimes you can panic when you're sitting on the Chesterfield, but when I see it, I'm thinking, wow, this looks pretty ideal for Trek. They got Bach Mollema in there. They got 3 Visma riders in there, but neither's a threat on general classification. We see Sepp Kuss is in there. He's got Stevie Kreiswick with him, but they're way down on GC. And when we look at the GC threat, it's Brendan Riviera from Ineos that's the biggest threat at about a minute and a half down on the general classification. When I saw this, I thought, wow, Trek's doing a great job. They got the only guy that matters in this front group, and that's Bach Mollema, because they need Bach further into the stage, and they got to get him over that category 1 climb with 72 kilometers when it's starting. That climb, like I said, 17% sections. And when we look at Bach Mollema's form hasn't been fantastic here at the Basque Country, so if you could give him a little bit of lead, I'm thinking this looks okay. You go back and look at the peloton, we see that it's 5 Trek riders on the front, and we see Fabio's on the front and Julian Bernard's on the front. They're doing a fantastic job setting the pace right. The peloton looks big, so you know they're not going full gas. But the group up front, when you're looking at under 25 riders, it's going to be chaos up there. We'll see them dropping down the next descent. They'll split in half. They'll come back together through the valley there. Then we see some other couple meaningless attacks that didn't make any sense. That gets brought back, and they're going to start with 72 kilometers to go, the first most difficult section here on this stage 6, the category 1 climb. When they start that, Esteban Chavez goes to work for EF Education. He's going to split this group of more than 20 riders down to about 8 riders up front. He's going to have some company. He's got Shaw there, his EF teammate. And then, of course, we see that Igor Arieta made the front split. We also see that Bach Mollema made the front split. Movistar have the rider up there, Mulhouse, and then Sepp Kuss and Stevie Kreiswick made it in this front group too. And Sepp's going to start going for KOM points at the top of this climb. But let me back it up a little bit and tell you what's happening with the field. As Trek's pulling into this category 1 climb with 72 kilometers to go, they're going up there, and it's time now for their climbers to go to work. They'll lose Fabio Fellini, and they're going to lose Julian Bernard, but that's okay. That was expected. That's why they did the early work. We see on the front there, though, that's their climber from yesterday, Baggioli on the front, and we see Theo Gegenhardt's in good position and Skjelmose as they're starting this climb. They get a little ways into the climb, about 1-2 kilometers into it. We're going to see Billy Lesurf from Soudal Quickstep throw an attack, and Soler is going to go with them. Solaire's going to drop Billy the Surf, and he starts going solo. As he's dropped Billy the Surf, and now he's catching the remnants of what was left over of the group that Chavez had dropped. He went over the top of the KOM, caught that group just going down the backside, and he's got about 4 or 5 guys with him, but he doesn't have any help with the exception of Basque, his teammate. His teammate Basque is going to work full-time on the front for Solaire. Now, we look at the peloton going over the top. Trek still have everything under control. The gap's really only at about 2:15 and about 1 minute there to Solaire. So everything's fine right now when we're talking about the strategy for Trek. We come into the Category 3 climb. We're going to see up front there that all of a sudden Bax's legs are starting to blow. Solaire's got to throw in a massive dig. He throws in a huge acceleration, but he's got some company on his wheel, and he's going to start dropping them all off left and right. As we're coming up to the top of the Category 3 for the breakaway guys, we'll see that Visma Lisa bike's on the front, Stevie Kreiswick with Sepp Kuss, because they want to get maximum KOM points. But look back there. Solaire is coming up to the back of this group, and he's got his teammate Igor Arrieta in this group. Igor Arrieta's smart. He's not dropping off on the climb because we don't know exactly what kind of climbing legs he has, so he's going to drop off just over the top after Sepp Kuss wins some more KOM points. Igor Arrieta is going to drop back for Solaire. He drops back for Solaire that has Hamilton with him, and those 3 riders will do a big pull down the descent to bring them all up to the front group of just under 10 riders up there. Now, they got to go to work, but what's happening in the back of the peloton as that gap up there is at about a minute to the peloton? Well, they had some help back there from Bora Hansgrohe. Bora Hansgrohe's Bob Youngles got on the front with Baggioli, and they did phenomenal work back there keeping this group up front of about under 10 riders of some threat there with Marc Solaire, who's at 47 seconds. They're keeping them close at just about a minute. But as we get up to the top of the KOM, the Category 3, we'll see the group is still close enough to the front to know that we got a full-bore GC battle here and a stage battle going on. It's going to be a magnificent Stage 6. Now, they'll drop down the backside of that Category 3, and as I said, Igor Arrieta along with Solaire, now they're driving it on the front full gas every time they can because they're hoping back there that they got some other GC threats with Ayuso, who was only 4 seconds down on the general classification. As they come into the big and final Category 1 climb here, the penultimate climb on Stage 6, this climb is about 30 kilometers to go before the finish, but 4 kilometers at just about 10%. It is a magnificent climb. It gives me goosebumps every time I'm talking about it. And we'll see Arrieta up there going full gas. Igor's throwing everything he possibly can to give the last bit of effort as this climb starts proper. Then Solaire's going to have to go to the front as Igor Arrieta blows up and pulls off hard to the right. Solaire's riding the front. In the back, what's happening in the peloton? Well, Bookman's on the front for Bora Hansgrohe. Now we're going to see that this is where Theo Gegenhardt starts getting on the front and taking over from Bookman. Ooh, I don't know for sure if I like this tactic, but if Skjelmose has fantastic legs, and if Theo Gegenhardt do, they can make some magic here. But remember, the gap was only at about 1 minute and 10 seconds up to Solaire. Solaire's 40 seconds down on the general classification, and if I take you back to the sprint competition that happened just before this climb, Solaire grabbed 3 more seconds because Bach Mollema was sleeping a little bit. Now, let's go back up to the front because Solaire is down to about 43 seconds down on the general classification as he's riding the front. Bach Mollema starting to come off the back there as Solaire's pace is getting too aggressive. And Chavez is going to throw in a huge acceleration with Oscar Only from DSM. The DSM rider looks like he's got some fine form, and Chavez does too as they're dropping Solaire. We look back, Sepp Kuss has gone out the back. Steven Kreiswick's hanging on for dear life, but finding his way back up to Solaire's back wheel, and Bach Mollema's drifting off the back. When I'm sitting on the Chesterfield, I'm yelling at Bach Mollema, you got to make it to the top of the summit. You can't get caught midway up this climb when they're 10% sections and 13% sections on this last Category 1 climb, or Skjelmose is going to be in trouble. We go back down to the peloton. Theo Gegenhardt's riding the front. But this is just about the time when we see that Skjelmose is going to throw in his attack. He throws in his attack, and I'm like, whoa, this is big time throwing in an attack right now. Bach Mollema's still not up to the summit, so he might catch him halfway up the climb. That'd be a nightmare, and then he'll be left on his own, and it'll be a tactical nightmare. Well, Skjelmose is throwing in attack, and he's got some company because Carlos Rodriguez is on his wheel. But look at Ayuso. Ayuso's just a little bit gap back, and if we look at Igor Arrieta, who got dropped but was in this front group all day long doing magical work for Solaire, as he was getting caught by the attack of Skjelmose, Arrieta looks back there and he sees that Ayuso is off the gap. Arrieta gives him the head nod like this, get on. He goes deep. One more big, massive pull for UAE team members. Igor Arrieta, when I thought his job was done at the bottom of this climb, no way, I was completely wrong. Igor Arrieta does a huge pull to bring Ayuso back up to the back wheel there of Soler and Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos Rodriguez will throw an attack. He'll get the gap, and Ayuso will go with him. Now Skjelmose is back there floundering. This is what I'm talking about. You cannot afford to make a mistake here at the Basque Country on these super steep climbs. And when he threw in the attack, Skjelmose, that is, early going up this climb, we're still got 30 kilometers to go in the race. Now he's chasing behind. Ayuso throws in another acceleration on Carlos Rodriguez, immediately gets on the radio, and he tells Soler, I'm coming, man. Back off the throttle up there. As they come around the left bend there, we'll see Soler sits up because he knows Ayuso's coming. Ayuso will clear the gap and close up to all the favorites up here with only went solo up there going up this Category 1 climb. Now with the leaders all back there together with the exception of Skjelmose, Ayuso's got his teammate going full gas on the front with Marc Soler pulling with everything he can. We'll see him start to come into the crowd. Oscar only DSM's having a magical ride here. He's going over the top solo. Then we look behind. It's the GC threat here of Ayuso with his teammate Soler. He's going over the top and they got some company, but you look a little further back as they're coming through the crowd. We see Skjelmose, he's catching Carlos Rodriguez, but he's only about 10-15 seconds behind Ayuso as he crosses over the top of the summit of this Category 1 climb. They drop down the descent. Only's flying through the corners. We'll see Ayuso doing the same thing with Soler on his wheel. And then we see Carlos Rodriguez start working with the race leader's yellow jersey back there, and they'll bridge up to the front group with about 21 kilometers to go. Now this puts about 5 riders in the front. We're talking about Soler's up there, Ayuso's up there, that's racing for the win here. Skjelmose is there, Chavez is there, Oscar only is still up the front, but Carlos Rodriguez is in that group. They'll start pulling full gas there with Soler going everything he can. When I'm sitting on the Chesterfield, I'm thinking you got to bring back Oscar only up here. Otherwise, he wins the stage. He takes the time bonuses at the end, so you can't jump over Skjelmose if you can't drop him up this final Category 3. Well, Soler does a magical job, and he'll pull back only before the bottom of this final Category 3. Now we got the group all together, and we got Skjelmose, who's race leader's yellow jersey. He's going to have to battle with a 4 seconds down on general classification. Ayuso starting up this last and final Category 3. Soler's pulling everything he can into this Category 3. He believes Ayuso's the strongest and best rider here. But if I take you back to that Category 1 climb, when it started with 30 kilometers to go and Skjelmose was throwing in attack, Ayuso was kind of out of place. Now he's not out of place, so if you think about it, he did a big bridge to get up there to Skjelmose when he started his attack up the Category 1 climb, and then of course dropped them at the top. Now we come into the Category 3. Like I said, Soler is going with everything on the pedals. He pulls over hard right. Then we see the attack from Ayuso. He goes hard. We see Skjelmose trying to hold him in with everything he's got. And then Carlos Rodriguez jumps around Skjelmose from Trek to bridge up to make 2 riders in the front. We got the virtual race leader up there, Ayuso, for UAE team members, pulling with everything he can. And Carlos Rodriguez sitting on. Rodriguez needs about 40-45 seconds to jump over Skjelmose. Skjelmose is still throwing in everything he can. Oscar only, I don't know how he's done it. He was in the original break. He is on flying form. Somehow he is salvaged on the back wheel there of Skjelmose, and he starts doing pull. But the front 2 riders, they're at about 15 seconds. Once we get up to the top of the KOM, we'll see Carlos Rodriguez and Ayuso go over the top together, and they got about a 35-second gap on the race leader's yellow jersey behind. Drop down the descent. It's about 8 kilometers to go, and it gets a little hairy in this right turn here with about 8 kilometers as we see Ayuso go wide in the corner and barely make the corner, but Carlos Rodriguez dices it up through the inside, comes out of the corner clean, and gets fully on the pedals as we see Ayuso have to do a full sprint to get back up to the Ineos rider. Looked like it could have been catastrophic in this right corner, but Ayuso saved it. We see the 3 riders coming behind because now Soler is back onto the group with Skjelmose and with Oscar only. Now they're dropping down full gas too, but they can't bring back any time. Once we get to the bottom of the descent and we start through the valley with just over 4 kilometers to go, we see there's a deal made from the 2 riders up front. Of course there is. This is the wisest thing you can do if you're Ayuso. You look over to Carlos Rodriguez and say you can have the stage, move up to second on the general classification. If you keep the pace fast, they make the deal. So we know the stage win's just about wrapped up here with Carlos Rodriguez and with Ayuso taking the general classification. But when we look back at the three chasers back there, Skjelmose still wants to hold a podium spot, and it's touch and go on whether or not if he can. Oscar Only's pulling hard through the valley. Skjelmose is pulling hard, but you know Soler's sitting on getting a free ride. As they come into 1 kilometer to go, 2 leaders in front are going to win today's stage for sure. They'll come into 200 meters with the last left bend there. We see Carlos Rodriguez on the front. He'll pull all the way from the last bend to cross the line and win today's stage 6 for Team Ineos. Now, we'll see second on the stage. Of course, that's Ayuso, and he's going to get the race leader's overall classification win right here because he was only 4 seconds back on GC. We look back at the 3 chasers as they come around the corner. Skjelmose going full gas all the way to the line. Oscar Only throws in acceleration, but his legs are hurting too much. Then we'll see Soler nip the podium spot here for bonus time here of 4 seconds, and Skjelmose needed that. He'll come through a 4th on the stage, but he'll lose 2nd on the general classification by 1 second to Carlos Rodriguez, who will finish 2nd overall on the GC, and Skjelmose 3rd. When you look at everything, when we see these guys standing up on the podium, we see there that Ayuso's got the chapela on and the race leader's yellow jersey, so UAE Team Emirates had a magical stage 6 here. Did everything correct that I could see when I dissect Trek's strategy with Skjelmose. They were beautiful, guys, really beautiful throughout the whole stage. But when I take you to that final Category 1 climb where they put Theo Gegenhardt on the front when Bookman was already riding, if you look at the gap, it was still only about a minute and 10 up there to Marc Soler. And remember, everybody always forgets to add in the kilometers. Marc Soler had been on the front from 70 kilometers to go with him or his teammate Arrieta, or with Basque riding the front with them throughout that whole from 70 kilometers all the way into 30 kilometers to go when we hit the last and final Category 1 climb. I think Trek panicked. Now, if Theo Gegenhardt just said, hey, I don't have any more legs. If Bora Hansgrohe said, hey, I don't have any more legs, but we got up front Bookman riding on the front right now, so there's no reason to increase the pace. Just set it steady, stay with your teammates, and just monitored the gap there to Soler. Soler's gap for GC had been moved from 47 seconds down to 44 seconds, so he had a little bit of room to play with. Skjelmose, that is. Once he went to attack, yes, you had Bach Mollema that's in the gap, but Bach Mollema was dropping fast. Bach Mollema needed to get all the way to the top of that Category 1 climb, which if you look at the video here where I show you, he's getting dropped with just a few hundred meters to go to the top of that summit. So that means they calculated wrong. And I don't know if they needed to panic with just Soler in that front group. It wasn't a threat. Everything before that last Category 1 climb, they were perfect. I mean, magical, guys. Magical. But as I always say up here on the Butterfly Effect, you can make mistakes early, you can make mistakes in the middle, but you can't make mistakes at the end of the race the closer you get to the finish. And I think Skjelmose, with his attack with Theo Gegenhardt going full gas, and then his attack lighting it up, that was a mistake. He never needed to touch the front. Soler was not yet a threat at that moment to Skjelmose, and you still had Bora Hansgrohe around you with multiple riders because Jai Hindley was there. We know that, of course, Max Schachmann was there and Bookman was riding the front. And then you had Theo Gegenhardt there plus Skjelmose. That's 5 riders that could have chased one Soler up at the front, but instead they panicked, they threw in the tack. And of course, Skjelmose ended up losing the general classification here after that acceleration that he did once Carlos Rodriguez and Ayuso lit him up on the Category 1. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition of the Butterfly Effect real soon.